You are listening to an American Free Press podcast. Joining me on the line is Carolyn Yeager. Carolyn, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's nice to be here.
I saw an article online, actually it was on your website, carolynyeager.net. Lakewood Orthodox welfare cheats are offered an amnesty. And of course that riled me as soon as I saw it. I want to get into that and the whole topic of Lakewood in great detail in a moment. But before we do, for the benefit of the listeners, could you give them a little bit of background about who you are?
Yeah, I've been online since 2007. I had a couple of websites before the one I have now, and I started this one in 2010, and it was built to contain all my podcasts and so on, which I used to do a lot of. I'm not doing them anymore, but I'm very interested in the topic of Judaism and its effect on our lives, our white Europeanism. I've been focusing on that, and I'm also very interested in modern history and World War II and the Third Reich and Holocaust and all of that history. So I've been aware of TBR and American Free Press. In fact, I started out reading American Free Press by a friend that I had met who was introducing me to all of this back in 2005 or so. He said, you have to get this American Free. I was reading his old copies, so I subscribed to it. So I've been aware and in touch with the people there for a long time. And I used to write, I was writing for the Barnes Review, a particular project. And the Barnes Review is publishing right now. We're just getting finished with it. A book of all my articles, of all the articles that appeared there, not all of them, but this whole series of them. That's my connection there, although I've never met you, Dave, and you've never met me, and I knew of some of your articles. But the Lakewood thing is something that I got involved with just last June by somehow I came upon something online about it, and I looked it up, and I was following it, and I wrote about 6 articles throughout the month of July on it. And then I picked up again in October, and I found this information about the amnesty, and I wrote 2 more articles on my website. But now all the writing and reporting on Lakewood has ended, and it had stopped too before this amnesty thing, and they wrote about that. But they're not really keeping up with it, and I think there's the usual reasons why. So that's all I have to say in an introductory manner, Dave.
Okay, great, Carolyn. I guess one of the articles you read about Lakewood was the one that I wrote in June of 2014. Is that right?
Yes, I did. I thought it was very good. I linked to it in one of mine.
Yes, I had lived in New Jersey, not too far from Lakewood. Of course, I knew about it more than your average person did, and that was why I wrote about it, because I sensed that the way that it was going, that it was going to have to break. Why don't you tell listeners about that as far as the way that it's going? And of course, I'm alluding to the demographics and what that would entail. Give them a little bit of history about Lakewood, New Jersey.
It was after World War II, so it connects with the same old business that I'm so interested in. It was after World War II that this Rabbi Kotler, who was from Russia, I think he moved from there after the war to something like Latvia, and from there he managed to get to the United States. And he had a yeshiva in Russia, and he wanted to open one in the United States. And he, of course, was in New York, and he ventured down into New Jersey, and he found this nice little quiet kind of a resort town, Lakewood, and which, as you can imagine, has a lot of woods around it, a woodsy area, and is on a lake. He opened his yeshiva. Well, it was very small. He had like 12 students or something in it. And, you know, it stayed small for quite a while. He was one of these old-time Orthodox Jews, very strict, and he did everything according to the laws that he followed. And so it went on, and he died, and his son took over. His son was also named Rabbi Kotler, had kind of the same first names even. And it's run now by his grandson. And I think it was basically his grandson. Of course, he grew some, but it was this grandson who's in charge of it now, who took over quite a long time ago. He's been in charge for a while. He was far more ambitious, savvy and all that, and he pushed the growth of it, and then it took hold. It just took off. People learned about it, and the Jews learned about it. They started flooding in there, and now it's the largest yeshiva in the United States and in the world, actually, outside of Israel. I think the one in Jerusalem might be bigger, but this one is probably going to overtake it, this one in New Jersey. they've just taken over the town. And from what I understand now, after all this, is that this growth and this trouble in the town started long before I became aware of it last summer. And with the arrest, that's what brought it into the news. It was all over the news if you search for Jews or Orthodox Jews, this welfare fraud that took place. But before that, this yeshiva was causing problems in Lakewood and surrounding area. And people were complaining, the people of the town, and there was a lot of unhappiness with it. And it was going on for quite a while before it burst into the news last June and July because of the arrests. And that's what started it all. These people had been engaging in welfare fraud for quite a while, and I don't know if you want to start there, Dave, or you want me to talk about that, or you had said that you wanted me to give some facts about the community, so I'll do that first. The Lakewood birth rate is currently about 4,000 babies born to these Jews every year now, and it's growing. That's 4,000 new residents a year just from this one Orthodox community. And the statistics are that Lakewood, which used to be just a smallish place, has grown to over 100,000 residents now, and half of them, maybe more, but they say half of them are from this Orthodox Jewish community. So they're basically new people that have moved in. There's a huge building boom there that's been going on for quite a while, and it's caused a lot of congestion and problems in the town, which people are unhappy about. A typical Orthodox Jewish family consists of mother, father, and 7 children. That's the typical. They might have 5 children. They might have 10 or 12 children. And 70% of this community receive some form of government assistance. And many of them are on multiple forms of government assistance. Now, here's something about the population, which I got from your article, Dave, and which is still current because I found this just recently, too, that they're still projecting this, that the population is going to grow from 100,000 it is today to probably 220,000 by 2030. Now, 2030 is only, 13 years from now? 12 years from now? And it's going to grow by that much? From 100,000, it's going to more than double? It's all going to be Orthodox Jews. Where are they going to go? Where are they going to fit in? It's a catastrophe for this town, but they managed to keep going along and not being stopped by anybody. The government's not doing anything. They're in the government in Ocean County, which is the county that Lakewood is in. They pretty much run the government now. They've been in the mayor's office. These Orthodox Jews, they run the school board because they're elected by their own people. So they all vote for them, and so they get elected to everything. Plus, you might think they're Democrats. They're not. They're Republicans. They voted for Trump, and they were told to vote for Trump. They support the Republicans, and they support Chris Christie as governor of New Jersey, and he doesn't go against them. He doesn't sit around and praise them. He doesn't say anything. He just stays quiet about it. But the state government is supportive. Everybody is supportive. Nobody's going to stand up against these Jews in New Jersey. There's a lot of Jews in New Jersey that aren't these Orthodox. This yeshiva is growing at a rate of 7% annually, and that's expected to rise. So this yeshiva is not going to curtail its growth and say, okay, we have enough students now. They're going to let them keep coming and just keep expanding, and they're expanding throughout Ocean County. So this is something to look at as an example of what can happen in an area when Jews decide whether they're Orthodox or not. These just happen to be Orthodox, which have a very, very high birth rate, which is the problem, which we can talk about. But the annual budget of this yeshiva is $35 million at the time that I got this information. And yet all these students are on welfare, county, state, and federal welfare programs of various kinds for children, and for children of poor families, for Medicaid, all kinds of health programs, etc. Special allowances that they get for heating their homes in the winter. And they all live in these big homes that have been built since this growth started, brand new. Some of them are single families, some of them are like duplexes, but they're new, they're good looking, and they're large. They have a lot of children, so they require a lot of help because they don't work. These men don't work. They go to school forever, and so they qualify for this. We can talk about the Pell Grants that they get, free health care, all kinds of stuff, food stamps, you name it, they're on it. And they were abusing this program. I don't know if you want me to stop now and let you come in, because we can talk about why these 26 members of this community were arrested in June and July.
What you said was so important. I think it's the most important part of this whole story. And then, yes, I want to get into then, if you could explain about the arrests, when that happened and what that entailed. But the most important part of this story is what you said, and this is, of course, in my humble opinion, is that this is the perfect example of what would happen if you just allowed Orthodox Jews free reign on their host countries. And you didn't say host, I'm saying host, because that is actually the term that they use to describe the country that they are residing in. They call it the host country. So, yes, this is such an important thing, and that's what always drove me to expose this story, because we're going to find out, where does it end with 4,000 new Orthodox Jewish babies coming down the pike every year?
In that one town. Just that
one town. And many of them with severe birth defects because of the fact that when an Ashkenazi Jew marries an Ashkenazi Jew, they could share, I think it's something like along the line of 20 genetic diseases, because I had contacted two of the top Jewish genetic institutes in the country to find out why that is, and both of them came back with the same answer. It's something called founder's effect. And founder's effect is a fancy euphemism term for inbreeding or incest. The reason is because these Orthodox Jews are related to one another, and they're not supposed to be doing this. And on top of it, I guess the thing that is, for me anyway, that puts me off, that turns me off about these people, is that they don't want to have anything to do with anyone who's not an Orthodox Jew. So why would these people in Lakewood welcome them in? They wouldn't. And one last thing, Carolyn, is that where's it going to go? Well, if people study the issue, which so few people do, they'll find out that they have been encroaching on the surrounding towns, and the surrounding towns are fighting back. They don't want them there. There's no reason that they would want them there, because they are literally an alien race of people, according to these residents of not just Lakewood, but the surrounding towns of Jackson. And there's another Ocean Township, which is in Monmouth County. This is, of course, as you said, Ocean County. Tom's River, which is in Ocean. They don't want them there.
Right.
Because they know what they're about. So it's not like, oh, you can't talk about Jews that way. That's anti. No, there's a reason why people don't like Jews. We're not here to talk about that, but there is a reason. And we didn't make it up. It's been going on for thousands of years. So these people who are their own clan, their own inbred clan, they don't want to have anything to do with us. We don't want to have anything to do with them, although we're much nicer the way that we were brought up here in this Western civilization, this white Western civilization. We lend a hand. We're more open to different races, different cultures, but they don't want to have anything to do with us. In fact, as you know, the rabbi, who was the head dictator there, the rabbi teaches them, if you break the law, you don't go to the secular authorities, you come to me. So it's even that bad where they don't even consider secular law enforcement legitimate. And the worst part of it is that these political whores like Christie and all the rest of them will not even, as you said, do anything about them because they block vote. So we have a real problem here on our hands. And I didn't mean to go off the rails here. Why don't you tell the listeners about these people who are arrested? But before you do, if you have anything to comment on about what I said.
Yes, I do. I appreciate everything you said there, and I especially appreciate you bringing out the term host country. That's what the diaspora is. We'll go out there and we'll make ourselves at home here or there or somewhere where we can make things work out well for us, and we will live there, but we will never really belong there because we are Orthodox Jews. We follow the rules, and we are a separate people, which God has made us a separate people, etc., and all of that. And then they have Israel to go to if they have to. And they are all very loyal to Israel, I expect, if it came to a crunch. So the thing is, they're, in my opinion, Dave, and I've tried to get this across in my articles, they are not loyal Americans. They will say, oh, we're good, we don't break any laws, we follow the laws, etc. But they do that to protect themselves, but they are not loyal Americans in any sense of the word. This takes us then into the people that were arrested. So when they say that they don't break laws, well, they certainly do white-collar crime plenty, and they have broken laws here. And the thing is that this was known, and the district attorney in Ocean County, 1 year before these arrests took place, and this was a county operation, not a state operation, he had a big meeting for the whole town. He didn't specify the Orthodox or anything like that, but he had a big meeting inviting everyone to come, and it was publicized in the newspapers and so on, explaining that it was wrong to take welfare benefits that you were not entitled to. And if you wrote on your applications things that weren't true, you were going to get in trouble. And you're going to get in trouble with the law. And he was warning the people not to do that because obviously they were doing it, and he wanted to stop it that way in advance. But they didn't take this warning. And obviously he was speaking to the Orthodox Jews, but like you pointed out, he wasn't going to say that specifically. So in June, the district attorney, without warning anyone, carried out arrests of 3 couples. 6 people in Lakewood, went to their homes without any warning and knocked on the door, read them their charges, arrested them, took them away right away, put them in police cars and booked them and put their pictures in the newspapers. And so the newspapers played it up. And that's what I saw. And the first article I wrote had these 6 of them, and I have their photographs there. I don't want to make fun of their looks, but they're very foreign looking. And it included a rabbi, one of their esteemed rabbis and his wife, and a businessman and his wife, and some other person from the synagogue and his wife. And it was kind of like shocking, whatever. But I suppose to the people in Lakewood, it wasn't shocking, but they were glad about it. Well, then in the following days and weeks, they arrested quite a few more until they had arrested 26 of them. And these were probably among the worst perpetrators of the fraud. And it was reported that among the ones they arrested, there was $2 million that they took that they weren't entitled to based on the information they gave to these agencies. So there's the crime, and then they stopped. And I was, of course, deep into this story, and I was waiting for what was coming next, and then nothing. At the end of July, there was nothing more on it. They didn't do any more arrests. They didn't do anything. And I was looking but couldn't find anything, so I finally stopped looking. And then when I did look again, I finally came upon this Amnesty thing in early October. Maybe it actually happened in late September. But it was something done by the state, not the county. And the state is more lenient, you might say. And the state comptroller's office came up with a plan of how to deal with all these guilty Jews by giving them the opportunity to come forward voluntarily and admit that maybe they had given incorrect information, and to apply to fill out an application in which they would agree to pay back any money that they had that they shouldn't have and pay a fine, which would be approximately $1,000 for most of them, a one-time fine, and to agree not to apply for any Medicaid. This was basically based on Medicaid only for 1 year, and then they would not be prosecuted. Well, actually, that's a good plan. It's a fair plan if they would do it. Because think about these Orthodox Jews, Dave. They've all got these kids at home, a number of them. So how are they going to arrest all these people and put them in jail like so many of the townspeople would like to see? And what are they going to do with all their children? But he had a big meeting in Lakewood. They announced what the plan was, and he said, we're having a big meeting to tell you more about it. And they rented a 3,500 seat rally ground or place, and less than 40 people showed up to hear what he had to say. They have to apply by December, sometime in December. So my opinion is that most of them will probably wait until the last minute or won't apply at all, thinking that they'll be able to get out of it one way or another. And they won't have to admit that they did this. They won't have to be on record. They won't have to pay the fine or pay it back. And they won't have to give up their Medicaid for 1 year.
First of all, thank you for the most important thing is paying such great detail to this matter. because, as you know and as I mentioned before, I have, and more people need to, but you really have examined it in such great detail, and you've assimilated those facts, and that is very important. So thank you for doing that, number one. What I thought was, when you were explaining that huge fine that they're going to give them, the $1,000, it reminded me basically of Israel itself, that they're paying us back with money we already gave them.
Exactly. Exactly.
These people are welfare cheats. This is something that was very well known to the residents of Lakewood and the surrounding areas for a long time. It's just that there isn't the political will to go after these people because, number one, they do block vote. And number two, I'm sure, because it's well documented that Israel applies blackmail and other forms of illegal pressure on politicians, I'm sure that there's something like that there. And the only other thing I wanted to say was that as far as, which is very interesting, the 3,500 seats that they prepared at taxpayer expense to explain to these dirtbags who broke the law and who might break the law in the future, I think that the reason is that, and you touched on this, is that they're just waiting, and the reason they're waiting is because they understand that the bloc, the voting bloc, the Orthodox voting bloc, has an incredible amount of power that they wield because they vote as a bloc, and they know that the leaders of this, what do they call it, a VOD, Carolyn?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, VAAD.
That's another thing, the whole weirdness of this alien culture here in our midst, in our country of America, which was founded by white Northern Europeans. These weird people with their weird language, and they don't even use our calendar. So it's just normal for an average, typical American not to want to assimilate people like this. There's nothing odd about it. There's nothing odd about people being anti-Semitic, even though that is a misnomer because Semitic applies to a language that was around in the 1770s. But anti-Jew, there's nothing wrong with that. It's been around forever. And I know Jews who have told me, Dave, people don't have to like me because I'm a Jew. It's ridiculous. So a lot of Jews know that organized Jewry on this level, on the level of those criminals at the Anti-Defamation League and those other lowlives, which is all they are because they're criminals. If people study it, they'll see that. There's nothing wrong with being anti-Jew. There's nothing wrong with not liking Jews. There's nothing wrong with not liking blacks. You can do that. You have the ability to do that. You're a free person. You can do that. And there's nothing wrong with Jews not liking non-Jews, which they don't. So this can't go one way. It's got to go both ways.
I agree with you about it's okay to be anti-Jew. But, I think what it really is, I don't think Americans or most people are anti-Jew. They're anti-Jew behavior. And Jew behavior is the cause of it all. And the Jews will never admit that. Even in a case like this, they won't admit that they're really repulsive and invasive and harmful, extremely harmful to the community they're in. They won't admit that at all. They think they're just wonderful citizens. They say that. And then what they're doing to the school system and in the schools is another whole side of the story, Dave, which we don't have to go into. I'm not saying what we should go into, but that just is a fact there.
We can go into the schools, too, because this is very important. A story broke 3 years ago, about the busing. They ran out of money, and they just couldn't bus them anymore, because this was one of the first signs of the system breaking down because of the pressure being put on Lakewood and Ocean County and New Jersey by this unfettered growth rate. Because of the number of kids they have, their fertility rate is huge. So, yeah, please tell listeners about what they're doing to the schools.
They don't send their children to the public schools. And they say that if they did, that would really be a huge burden for the Lakewood Public School District. And so they're doing the town a favor by not doing that. They all send their children to private schools, Jewish schools. And as they were growing in number there in Lakewood, all these rabbis and Orthodox Jews opened up various private schools. So they've created their own schools for the Jewish kids, and they send them to these schools, and they're expensive. Whatever Jews do in business, they want to make a lot of money. And so not only is that yeshiva extremely expensive, these Jews are required, Orthodox Jews, if you're really Orthodox, to attend a yeshiva for as long as you can for the men from the time you're around 20 or so. And you'd think that the community would provide it then for their own people since they require them to go there. But no, No, it's totally privately run by other Jews, of course, and they charge a tuition there that's like an Ivy League college, maybe not the most expensive Ivy League college, but it's like $40,000 a semester for tuition. I might be exaggerating that. I haven't checked the fact yet, but I know I was shocked at the amount it cost, because they have thousands of students there. So think of the money they're pulling in there. And these students, of course, can't afford it at all. So they get Pell Grants. They're huge users for their numbers of Pell Grants from the U.S. government that they're getting from all of us living everywhere, not just in New Jersey. But back to the school district, K through 12, they send their kids to these private schools, and they're expensive too, and they need to get help to pay the tuition. But the other thing is that it's the school district's expense. They're required to bus these children to whatever school they go to, because they passed these laws in the 60s and 70s that busing was required all over the country to integrate the schools. So the school districts have to pay for this busing without any regard to religion, race, blah, blah, blah. So all these Jewish kids get free busing to their schools every day. And what's more, what is so shocking is that they have to take the boys and the girls in separate buses. And so some buses go to one school and some buses go to a number of schools on a certain route. I don't know the number. There's many of these schools and they're all over the place. They can't take the boys and girls in the same bus. So then you're doubling the buses required that way. Plus, that guy who owns a school bus transportation company there in Lakewood is, of course, another Orthodox Jew. And he's making a fortune with that. And so the busing is extremely expensive, and the school district is going broke based just on that.
Again, Carolyn, thank you so much for the really intricate details, the way that you have studied this issue. Obviously, I can tell it's so important that most people who haven't studied it like you have, like I have, this would be all new to them, this stuff. And of course, they would have to go and do the research themselves if they had any questions about what we're saying. But obviously, what we're saying, we know because we've spent the time doing it, is accurate. So just go to Carolyn's website, carolynjaeger.net, and you can benefit from all of the time that she spent studying this for nothing, for no money to do this, obviously.
It's my hobby.
Well, it's
Dave.
a great hobby. Thank goodness you're doing it. And I just wanted to say that I looked it up real quick because we were talking about the yeshivas, and you said, I don't know how many there are. And the reason is because there are a lot of these Jews in Lakewood who just turn their home into a yeshiva for the tax benefits. But let me read to you what it says here about that. That there are many, and this is from Wikipedia, which many times can be counted on for perfunctory road information, but of course we know that they censor material. I wrote about that, about how they wouldn't allow a certain part of Larry Silverstein's history in the entry for him on Wikipedia. But here it says on Wikipedia, there are many yeshivas and Jewish day schools serving the Orthodox Jewish community, with the school district providing busing to 18,000 students, enrolled at 74 yeshivas as of 2011 and 25,000 by 2016. And of course that big one, Beth Medrash, I don't even know how to say this stuff, but Gehovah has an enrollment in excess of 5,000, making it one of the world's largest yeshivas. But let's just look at these numbers here. 18,000 students, and I'm putting quotes around that, because let's say I go to school to learn how to be an auto mechanic or a plumber or whatever it might be, or a nurse or a doctor. What are they going to school for? What is I don't understand. How are they going to benefit society?
No, they're not.
They're not, exactly.
No.
So here, if you look at just these numbers, if they're accurate, which I don't have any reason to think they're not, but 18,000 students at 74 yeshivas as of 2011, and then just a short 5 years later, it goes from 18,000 to 25,000.
Yeah.
So if we take our handy-dandy calculator and we figure that out, if it's 50%, it's going up by 9,000. So 18,000 plus 9,000 is 26. It's gone up by 40% in 5 years, Carolyn. What does that mean? Where's it going?
Well, that's why they say that the population is going to explode in the next 13 years to double, more than double, and it's all going to be Orthodox Jews because the other populations are leaving. More white people have left Lakewood than black or Latino people, but some of them have left too, but most of them don't feel capable of relocating, moving somewhere else. So they're there, and probably white people who don't have children in school anymore because the school district is mostly African American and Latino. So who's going to support them? I don't know. When you mentioned all the day schools for the kiddies, you said something like, what number did you use, 50 some or something?
They just say there are many yeshivas and Jewish day schools serving the Orthodox Jewish communities.
Yeah, we have to separate that because yeshivas are for the older males and the day schools are for the public school kids, the ones who would be going to public school, K through 12. And a lot of these schools are for special students. One of the biggest ones is called the School for Hidden Intelligence or something like that. All these euphemisms they use for the impaired kids, the slow kids, the special education kids that they have.
The reason is primarily because of the fact that they have incestuous ties. So
right.
When you have sex with your cousin, this is what happens. It's just not natural, but nobody wants to tell these people it's not normal. I mean, I know the Rothschilds have been doing it for centuries, but this is something that's not right. It's not something that should be accepted in Western civilization because besides the fact that we have to then burden the rest of society with paying for these people.
That's right. That's the whole point. They're burdening this country. The more of these people we have here, the more of a burden they are. And there's other burdens that non-Orthodox Jews bring about. But these Orthodox, one of the most obvious is that they have so many disabled children and they require a lot of expense all their lives. There's a whole thing that we're supposed to make sure that everybody, everything under every circumstance survives and has everything they need and want, no matter what it costs in this day and age. If you bring up the subject of money, you're like, horrible. How can you do that? We're talking about a human life. Well, this is not the way the world ever works or nature works. This is why things have gotten blown out of bounds and we can't afford anything and everybody's in debt. We live on debt because we're not paying for things with real money. We're just expanding the debt. This has huge consequences, which just go so far. And it's not something you can say, as I would think a lot of listeners, a lot of people will say, well, you're just talking about one town in New Jersey where this school is. It's a religious school that's so popular. You're not talking about the whole country. So they'll have to deal with their problems there and leave the rest of us alone. I'm not going to get involved. I don't think it's that big of a problem. That's what most people will do with this information.
Yes, and I think that the way to let these people know who are saying what you said, oh, it's just Lakewood, let them deal with it, is that no, because mathematically, if you extrapolate where this is going based upon how many kids they're having, literally, this is a contagion. It's like a virus that is and will spread beyond Lakewood as it already is doing now, like I said, into Jackson, into Toms River, trying to get an Ocean Township in Monmouth County. Howell, which is a big, wonderful town there in New Jersey, they're going to Howell as well. So it's going to spread beyond New Jersey, beyond Ocean County, beyond Monmouth County. There are 21 counties in New Jersey. It's going to go and go and go, and it literally could, if left unattended, devour the host country. Mathematically, that can happen.
Well, right. And speaking of Israel, Israel doesn't want these people. They would not want them to come to Israel because of the way they expand their population. Where would they go? And they don't like the Orthodox Jews they have now because there's such a problem. The Orthodox in Israel are constantly complaining about one thing or another, and they make extreme statements, which they're careful not to do here, about non-Jews and so on. And they come here, and we're talking about being a host country, and we are, in a sense, hosting them and paying a lot of money for them. Nothing compared to what all the wars for Israel cost, but that's another issue. But still, for just supposedly ordinary citizens, there's a high bill for these people that all the rest of us pay. Their whole thing is that they're not going to pay their own way. They don't pay their way. They figure out how to get others to pay their way, and they succeed at it because we're such saps and such easy marks, and also because of their power in the voting booth. You'd think there weren't that many of them, but when they vote in a block, they can make the difference in elections, and they do. So there's got to be a way, and there are ways to fight against this.
That's perfect, Carolyn, because that's what I was going to ask next was, is there a solution to this? And if there is, what is it? I don't know.
Well, the problem is, because I always go deep, deep into the source, but the problem is we in the United States have been guilty of lying about history, lying about a lot of things ourselves, and now we're stuck covering this stuff up, and it makes us vulnerable to Jewish maneuvering, and in this way we can't point out the problem the way it is. We've given Jews too much power in our country, and we can't talk about it. We can never mention it. So we have to somehow change that. We have to be able to say what weakens a country and what strengthens a country. And we know that countries are strengthened by being united, as Donald Trump keeps telling us now, but he's got a blind spot where it comes to the Jews because he knows that we're united by history, by language, by customs, but he won't talk about genetics. No Western country will talk about genetics now. But this is a fact, and particularly if you just leave out genetics and talk about the others. As we pointed out, these people are foreign to this country, and they do not assimilate. They may follow the laws and pretend like they're harmless, but as this thing with the welfare fraud has shown, they're not exactly harmless. And the other thing is the disabled children that they have that are so expensive and costly. We have to be able to talk about this like you and I are doing now. I'm trying to be as polite as I can, but there's some things that just need to be said. I think we're making a little progress with this, actually, talking about Jews. I remember it was only back in like 2005 or so when I became fully cognizant of how much power Jews had when I realized from an RBN radio program is what it was, that I was shocked when I heard somebody say the word Jew on that radio program. And I thought, oh, you can't say that. Then I was shocked at myself for having that reaction that, oh, you can't say the word Jew. I was careful not to do that. You had to say a Jewish person, that you could kind of get away with that. But we've come a long way from there, pointing out that Jews themselves call each other Jews. They use the word Jew all the time. Why can't we? And this is the way it is with everything with these people. They can do it, and they do it, but they tell us we can't do it. And why do we fall for this? We have to get over this hump and be able to talk about facts and what we see in front of our eyes, just as it is.
Carolyn Yeager, Carolyn, I want to thank you so much for all the time you spent explaining all this to listeners. I had a great time listening to you. I'm just sorry that it took us so long to meet like this, but I am very much looking forward to talking to you again real soon.
Well, that would be great, Dave. I enjoyed it very much.